It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Welcome to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. January 31st, a very important day. There's a special election going on in the 27th Pennsylvania Senate District. And, you know, I've said many times, you've heard me say it many times about accountability, why it is so urgent for us to, first of all, vote. Second of all, know the people who you're voting for. We've been promised many things throughout the years, haven't we? We've been promised that they're going to do away with school taxes, property taxes. We've been promised so many things, and when they get in the office, somehow or another, it never happens. So what I say is that, you know, forget the nonsense, my friends. I could make a 30-second commercial for anyone. Last year, I've seen so many phony 30-second commercials. In fact, why is it that they, out of town, spend millions of dollars from different states in the state of Pennsylvania? Why is that? When we the highest crime in Philadelphia, the highest crime in Pittsburgh. Where is the accountability? Well, January 31st, special election, on my show today, Lynda Culver. Now, she's been in the Pennsylvania District legislator for 12 years. And I have to tell you, before we did this show, I perused and I did my homework as to who she was. And Lynda, so nice to have you on the show. I wish you the best. When I went to look you up, I heard of you. The people in your district love you. But when I looked it up, I was printing like crazy. I said, you owe me an ink cartridge and a ream of paper. There's so many great things here that are said about you, and it's encouraging. However, you know, throughout the years, you know, you've been there for 12 years, and you've accomplished a lot, according to that. Sometimes it's difficult. Some of the key issues that you will be addressing, and will you be able to accomplish those goals that you would like to set for it? What do you think they are?
So, I mean, I can boil it down to three areas that I think are important for us to pay attention to. And before I start, I want to talk about making promises. The only thing that I can promise the voters is, one, I promise to always listen. Two, I promise to work hard. And three, I will promise to earn your trust. I will work hard to do that. Those are the things I can promise you. When I get to Harrisburg, you know, you're dealing with the Senate, which is 50 members, and the House, which is 203 members. And I've been a part of the House for the last 12 years, so I can tell you it takes time and it can be difficult to get a piece of legislation through, because I know it's hard for people to believe, but there is always someone else who has a different view from you or the people that you represent. So it's very important for us to work together and try and make them understand why this is important to our district, why we need to get this done. For me, I think it's important that we invest in people. And investing in people means that we give them a solid foundation so that they can be successful. And for my folks, that means, you know, providing a great education for them, you know, starting with preschool, daycare, going on, you know, K through 12, and wherever their talents lie, whether it be, you know, going off to college and getting a 4-year degree, getting an associate's degree, going to a career and technical education school, or whatever fits them the most. We need to be able to provide those supports to them, make it affordable and make it accessible. We need to provide supports to families. We need to make sure that our youngest learners are taken care of, all the way up to our senior citizens, and those parents that are caught between taking care of their children and taking care of their parents. We have the supports there for them. And I don't believe that we are there yet. I believe we need to make sure everyone has the mental health supports that they need, the drug and alcohol supports that they need, the healthcare supports that they need. And the second thing I think we need to do is support our infrastructure. I know the 108th district, and I'm learning it's not that much different in the senatorial district. We've been working at for years trying to upgrade the infrastructure. And I know people think of infrastructure as just roads and bridges, and that's the most obvious thing to us because we drive them. But I think it's really important that we focus on our water, our sewer, our utilities, the gas, the electric, the broadband, which, as you know, if you live anywhere in central Pennsylvania, you can go in and out of a call, 10 times depending on where you're driving. And it's healthcare again, and it is our parks and recreation. One thing we learned during COVID is they were heavily used. It is directly correlated to the health of our population, being able to get out there and walk and recreate. And so those are the two things I think we need to invest in. And I think if we do that, the third thing is creating an environment where business wants to invest in us is extremely important, because we need those family sustaining jobs so people can support themselves, support their families, and that we have somebody investing in us. And part of that is making sure that we're not standing in their way. We're not making following the regulations or getting their permits or filing their taxes more difficult than it actually needs to be.
In terms of what you just said, okay, being in the Pennsylvania legislature, you were there for 12 years. In your district, have you accomplished anything that you just said in your specific district?
Yeah, I think we've increased supports for our seniors. We've invested very heavily in early learning. I think the percentage has gone up over the last 10 years, is up over 400%. Education, every year we've increased that more. I know COVID has hit and our outcomes are not what we have expected, and it's going to take some time for us to recover from that. Our senior citizens were hit hard with that, and we invested quite heavily in this last budget, trying to make sure that the care is there for them. And we have, as we term this, silver tsunami coming. We knew we weren't prepared, and we've been trying to get prepared for that. We did the first ever child tax credit in Pennsylvania this last year. So we are working hard to make sure that we do that investment in people. But as you know, there's always more that can be done. Situations arise like COVID that just change everything that we know, how we function, and we're still trying to learn and adapt to that.
Speaking of COVID, I'm not going to take it lightly. How much do you think that COVID situation was political versus real? We have a lot of controversy out there now about COVID-19, and was it brought on because of political reasons? And now we have, coming close to the presidential election, we're starting to see more of this COVID's here, COVID's there, et cetera, et cetera. Hopefully it's not true, and I'm not taking it lightly. But how, in your mind, how much do you think is political and how much do you think is real?
So, I think the reality is COVID was here. People have, died from it. People have long-lasting effects from it. And some people got it and just did really well. It is a new pandemic. Do I think people politicized it? Sure. I don't, people can politicize anything that they want. I think it's important that we provide people with facts, let them make their decisions, what's best for them, best for their family, best for the society that they live in. It did become politicized, and as you know, it made people very angry. And we're still coming out of that. And I don't know if you know, I was a kidney transplant patient last year. And boy, talk about wearing a mask when it was extremely unpopular, especially as a Republican trying to explain that to people. Well, I'm immune compromised, and the first 6 months are the hardest. And so, I learned how politicized it was. And I would have had to wear that mask, COVID or no COVID.
Yeah, you see, Lynda, the concern I have, and I read a lot about you, and I'm very impressed. I mean that sincerely.
Thank you.
And I tell, every politician that's been on my show, 90% of them are trying to do the best, 10% are full of it. They just lie to you, and just to get the votes. Like I remember back, I don't know if you recall, when the casinos first came out, there was the promise was made to do away with the help the seniors in taxes and school tax and property tax. It never happened. And every politician comes on the show, Lynda, we're going to do property tax. Now I realize that you've done some things in your district in the property tax and school tax. Is that correct?
So, we've tried to try and figure out how to fix the property tax issue. Because as you know, most Pennsylvanians would like to get rid of property tax. Um, we've supported for seniors, increases in property tax rent rebate. We're trying to, we're doing tax credits for parents. Once you start to really dive into property tax, our tax system is pretty antiquated because we're a very old state. All the taxes, are built upon each other. And I think if you change that, because I think people think an elimination of property tax means that goes away. It doesn't go away. It funds our public schools. So we have to find a way to make sure we're funding our public schools. We're not overtaxing our citizens. And, this has been a real issue for young families and our senior citizens trying to stay in their homes. I think that if we are able to come up with some really great solution to property tax, it will impact another part of people's lives, whether it be, a sales tax, whether it be a different kind of tax, the personal income tax, a combination. The issue with that is we have Pittsburgh and Philadelphia already charging a higher sales tax than the rest of the state. So does that tax them out of their tourism market? I don't have the answer to that, but I do think that if we take away the ability for school districts to raise the property tax, we are probably going to have to take some of the responsibility and decision making for school districts to make sure that it falls under the budget. I just had a phone call with the realtors this morning. I did an interview with them, and they're heavily invested in, property tax because it depends on how you sell homes and where you place people. And, we've taxed them with helping us trying to find a solution to this. And I just want to caution people, if we eliminate the property tax, it will have to shift to somewhere else. Some people like the sales tax because people can make a choice. Do I buy a $20,000 car, a $40,000 car, or a $60,000 car? Do I buy, the big TV, or do I buy a smaller TV? So I'm paying a lesser price, therefore paying a lesser tax. Some people like the personal income tax, thinking it's more fair. I don't have the solution for property tax. We will continue to look at it. And honestly, I think we're at the point where we will take any, solutions people may have in the public. It doesn't mean because I'm their representative or I become their senator, I have all the answers. I do not. I function really well when my constituents are coming up with ideas and solutions, and sometimes there are really great solutions that we can put into action. So I would love to see property tax go away, to take that burden off our seniors and our young families. But we just have to make sure that we are appropriately supporting our public schools.
It's interesting because families have to balance their budget. All right, so if you're making $40,000 a year and your household income is $40,000 a year, you certainly have to balance it. There's only so much you could spend, so much you could buy. It's a balance situation. So there's a lot of questions out there. We hear about the Pennsylvania lottery. The only person ever to come on this show and explain to us in full detail, without the political nonsense, was our now Congressman Dan Muser. Always was truthful and said, Sam, here's the revenue, here's where the money goes, because we hear, these millions of dollars. I don't know where the Pennsylvania lottery is going. If they're helping seniors and they're supposed to be record-breaking, I don't know, okay? I'm hoping that it's a balance. And where are the check and balances? Who says, where is this going? Is it going here? And who supervises them? That's one question I'm going to get back to before my break. The other thing is, I'm here at the Laurel Mall now with our studios. And of course, this is over 6,000 shows I've done, so I know a lot of people throughout northeastern and central Pennsylvania. I can't tell you, Lynda, how many people come up to me. I just did it right now before I came in. Sammy, what are we doing with our gas prices? What's going on in this country? It's a shame what's happening, not only with the gas prices, inflation, where we're getting energy, now they're getting their utility bills. There are people actually crying when they're talking to me. They're in pain. It's that bad. And here again, I know you don't have that magic wand. We wish we did. But I do think that there's some solutions out there. Folks, I'm talking to Lynda Culver. She is running in it will be the 27th Senate District. It's a special election, January 31st. You can see from this discussion so far how very important it is that we put the right people in there and make them accountable. All right, we'll take a break. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. Once again, I want to thank you for making the Sam Lesante Show the #1 talk show in northeastern Pennsylvania. That comes from the Susquehanna Polling and Research Surveys scientific poll. They are the #1 pollster in the state of Pennsylvania, so we appreciate that very much. You can watch all of our shows, ssptv.com, or our YouTube channel. I'm speaking with today on the show Lynda Culver. A very special elections happening January 31st. Extremely, extremely, extremely important that you vote. She is running in the 27th Senate District in the state of Pennsylvania. She's been in the legislation for 12 years in the 108th District. Lynda, once again, thanks for coming on the show. Before I forget, you have 3 children?
Just one.
Oh, one. Okay. All right. I see. I gave you an extra 2. Come on.
I would have loved to have an extra 2.
Yeah. Looking at what we bring to the table, you have 203 members in the state of Pennsylvania. Now you come from a district that there's needs that have to be done. Then we have Philadelphia's needs, and we have Pittsburgh, and so it's this as Watchwo said, Dane Watchwo said, it's a matter of compromise. Okay, and I'm sure you know that you've been doing it for years. All right, how do you compromise common sense? How do you do that, okay? Especially when you have people who have extreme agendas, no matter what you say, and I've dealt with them. How do you do that? How will you do that in the Senate when you become a state senator?
I mean, there are some folks that are never going to want to compromise and never want to have a discussion. But the funny part of that story is whenever I do a piece of legislation, I go up to the floor and I look around and I say, who on the Democrat side will hate this legislation? And when I find that person, I go over and I ask very nicely, would you mind going over my proposed legislation and marking it up for me, telling me what you don't like?
Smart. Smart.
Some will agree. They start laughing and they're like, are you sure? I'm absolutely positive. And some will just not do it for me. And then I look on the Republican side and I do the same thing. And then I compare the notes from the two. And oftentimes we're not that far off. Sometimes we're very far off, but it helps me gauge how do I move this legislation through here. And it also helps getting people engaged that might not have otherwise even considered it and just said no. So it's important to me that you establish relationships. And the best way to do that is get to know the person, get to understand their district, how it operates, why it operates the way it does, what's the culture. And I can tell you, when we were talking about Sunday hunting one time, I was adamantly no because of the feedback I was receiving from my district. And, what they were telling me is, if you live in rural Pennsylvania, we've had, shots go through a church on a Sunday morning because, it was surrounded by cornfields. I've had folks on my back lawn with loaded guns that were not locked. Because they assume when they're out in the rural areas, there's no homes. Well, there is homes in the rural areas. So this member and I from Philadelphia were coming up the steps together, and he said, Lynda, I just don't understand why you're a no on Sunday hunting. So I went on to explain all these reasons. I had a very long list, and I said, and let me just put it this way. What if I came to your neighborhood and you found me in your backyard hunting squirrels? Well, you can't do that. I live in the city. That's not safe. Exactly. You're still close to my home and your shots enter my property sometimes. And Sunday is the only day we can go walk our dog, ride our horses, ATVs, or go for a walk ourselves. And he said, you may have changed my opinion on this. I never thought about it. So it's important just to establish relationships. And the one thing they taught us when we got there is get to know everybody and make sure that you can list 3 things about them. They have 3 children, they're married, this is their hobby, because it helps you connect with them and then it helps dialogue. I'm not saying we always agree because we get to know each other. We may not, but at least we can have that conversation of, okay, this is why we disagree. Can we get to a point where we can move this forward? Sometimes we can and sometimes we can't, but I would say more often than not, we can come to some sort of agreement.
All right, so you get in the Senate. What's going to be your first piece of legislation? What is the first thing that you're going to focus in, or the top 5 things you'll focus in on?
I hadn't truly thought about this yet because this happened so quickly. I put everything in little silos. There is legislation that I need to finish that did not get finished last session. And one of them is licensing applied behavioral analyst. And I don't know if you know anything about them. Historically, they've been known for dealing with children with autism and
Yes.
behavior issues. But they've been making great strides with, veterans with PTSD, people with PTSD from a violent crime, children that have been molested, people with memory issues, and or seniors with dementia. So they are making great strides. So we tried last term, I had just signed on to it to advance that so they could get licensed, get recognized, and make sure that the person who's taking care of them actually has the right credentials. I will need to finish that. There's another one that if it affects you, you're only going to know about it. There are times when somebody owns a vehicle, no longer wants to pay for it. It's about to get repossessed, or maybe they need money. They sell it to a crusher or somebody who takes vehicles and resells them, a salver. And it's a little difficult to check and see if there is a lien on the vehicle. Sometimes you have to wait 3 weeks or longer. We're having cars getting crushed pretty significant amount each month, and the lien holder doesn't find out until after the car is crushed and no longer worth anything. So I have to finish that piece of legislation. This will be the 3rd year that we've done it, so I'm hoping that we can get to the compromise we need to make sure that that's not happening. The other thing I want to do is legislation to address kidney donors or anybody who donates an organ. It's really difficult for them to get off work for all the pre-testing. They want to make sure they're as healthy as they can be before they donate an organ, making sure that they are compensated through maybe workman's compensation. Other states are doing it and moving it through, and making sure that a donor is not penalized by their insurance company as they go on. One of the things I learned going through this process, the kidney donor is one of the healthiest people on this planet, because they won't let them do that unless they're extremely healthy. Mm-hmm. So I would like to advance legislation in those regards. And there's some stuff I'm just starting to look at regarding dental accessibility, dental affordability. As you know, in rural Pennsylvania, that becomes an issue. And there was a report put out yesterday by the Legislative Budget and Finance Committee that recommended some things the legislature could do. So I'm going to be taking a look at that as well.
Very quickly, how do you think you're going to work with the Democratic governor?
Josh Shapiro was in the House with me when I first got there. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping, historically as Attorney General, he's been extraordinarily helpful to the 108th Legislative District. We had some really tough issues going on, and he was helpful. So my hope is that he will, consider my view as well as my constituents. And he will, put that into what he's doing. It's early to try and decide what he's going to do. Yes. But I always go in hopeful that they're going to communicate and that they're going to, work to do what's best for all Pennsylvanians, not just a small segment.
Well, if you do in the Senate what you've done in the legislature, based on these tremendous reports that I have, and when I mention your name to people in your district, they just have the greatest respect for you, and I think that's very, very good. Lynda, I wish you the best. Thanks for taking the time to doing the Zoom. I'd love to have you here in person, but you got a lot on your plate. We got a minute left. Anything in closing you'd like to tell your constituents or the voters out there?
Just a couple of things. Just don't ever assume that we know what is going on in your life or what's impacting you and ask why nothing's being done. If it's not happening to us personally or no one else said it to us, we don't know. So always communicate what is going on, what are your concerns, and how can we help you? Second thing is January 31st, you're probably not thinking about waking up and going to the polls. I just ask you might make a reminder on your calendars. If I could ride through your towns on horseback and ring a bell, I certainly would. but that's not going to be happening. So I just ask that everyone exercise their right to vote on January 31st.
Well, don't be any stranger to the Sam Lesante Show. I know we have Senator Argyle and a lot of people here have been coming on maybe every 3 months to give us a report what's happening. We'd love to have you come on and give us an upgrade. I wish you the best, and it's so nice that you're healthy. Now you got that kidney transplant. Keep the faith. Remember the people on fixed incomes and our seniors who are getting hammered every day. Stay healthy. Remember, folks, January 31st, very important election. Lynda Culver is running for the 27th Senate District in the state of Pennsylvania. Please, it's very important that you vote. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.